The chosen one. The storm raged inside you, and no matter how hard you tried to silence it, the whisper would not fade. It spoke in the pauses between your heartbeat, in the ache that refused to leave your chest. It said, "This is your moment." But your mind fought back, asking, "Why me? Why now?" You stood there, caught between two worlds, one that begged for ordinary peace, and another that demanded sacred purpose. You tried to ignore it, to blend into the noise of daily life, but heaven had already marked you. The call wasn't gentle. It tore through your comfort like lightning through a silent sky, and you knew, deep down, that something irreversible had begun. That's how divine awakenings arrive, not with comfort, but with collision. You didn't ask for this, but destiny rarely seeks permission. It only requires surrender. You look around, and everything feels both familiar and foreign. The same walls, the same faces, yet the air carries a charge you can't explain. Time itself feels heavier, like the world has stopped holding its breath, waiting for your next move. A voice within you whispers, "You've been prepared for this." But another voice answers, "You're not ready." And in that tension, the battle for your faith begins. You remember the nights you prayed for clarity, but heaven gave you silence. The days you begged for peace, but life gave you storms. What you didn't know was that silence was strategy and storms were training. Every unanswered prayer, every closed door, every heartbreak, they were all shaping your spirit to stand here in this exact moment. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. The world may not see it yet, but heaven does. Somewhere beyond what your eyes can grasp, a clock has struck in the divine realm. Something is aligning, and though you cannot explain it, your spirit feels the vibration, a trembling between what was and what must be. You start to feel the conflict grow. One part of you longs to stay hidden, to retreat into the safety of what you know. The other part refuses to settle, whispering that there's something more. This is the sacred paradox of the chosen, the longing for rest while being called to rise. There is no manual for this awakening. It feels like both breaking and becoming. Some days, you'll question everything you thought you believed. Other days, you'll feel fire in your veins that words can't contain. But every tear, every doubt, every ache will become evidence of transformation. This is where faith stops being an idea and becomes a battle. You look back at the moments that almost broke you, the betrayals, the waiting, the confusion. You realize that those were not detours, they were doorways. You had to lose your way to find your purpose. You had to be stripped of certainty so that belief could be born in you again, not borrowed from others, but forged in the fire of your own surrender. Tonight, the stars seem closer. The air feels sharper. It's as if creation itself is leaning in to see what you'll do next. Because this isn't just about survival anymore, it's about stepping into alignment with something ancient. Something written long before your fears were born. You are standing at a crossroads between who you were and who you're meant to be. And this decision, this moment, will echo through eternity. You don't need to understand every detail. You just need to trust that divine timing is never late. The same hand that guided prophets through deserts is guiding you now. The same breath that parted seas is breathing courage into your lungs. The same voice that called light from darkness is whispering your name. But make no mistake, destiny will not wait for convenience. Heaven moves on schedule, and you are being asked to move with it. You may feel unworthy, but every chosen one does. You may feel underqualified, but heaven delights in using what the world overlooks. The broken vessel still carries oil. The cracked seed still births forests. And you, yes, you are the miracle hidden in plain sight. You ask, why now? Because the world needs what you've been hiding. Your pain has become prophecy. Your waiting has become weapon. Your silence has become signal. Something in you begins to shift. The trembling turns into stillness. The confusion becomes clarity. It's as if a door has opened in your soul, and light begins to pour in. You sense that what's coming will require everything you are, and everything you're not yet. But before you move, you must decide. Will you obey the whisper, or bow to the fear? Because the moment you say, yes, truly, yes, the universe itself begins to rearrange to make way for your calling. Doors you didn't know existed begin to unlock. People you've never met begin to think of you. Paths hidden in darkness begin to reveal themselves, step by step. This is not a coincidence. This is choreography. Heaven has been rehearsing this moment for generations. waiting for you to awaken. So when the next sunrise comes, don't just see it as another morning, see it as a message. Because Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, the days ahead, are marked, not by routine, but by revelation. Something in your life is about to shift. Not gently, but dramatically. The first sign will not be thunder. It will be stillness. Then, the wind will move. Then, the doors will open. When it happens, remember this moment. Remember that you were told. Remember that your spirit already knew. And when your heart starts to race with both fear and faith, whisper to yourself, "This is it. This is the beginning." If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe, because this is only the first awakening. The deeper calling, the one that will test every corner of your faith, is still to come. The Chosen One has just begun to rise. The Chosen One. He woke before dawn, the silence pressing against his chest like a weight too heavy to name. The air felt charged, as if the unseen had drawn closer overnight. His heart beat with that strange rhythm again, the rhythm of both calling and confusion. He tried to steady himself, whispering, "I'm ready." But even as he said it, doubt crept in through the cracks of his conviction. The first light broke through the window, pale and hesitant. He wondered if heaven still spoke to ordinary men, or if the whispers he heard were just echoes of his own longing. Destiny felt too vast, too fierce for hands still trembling from yesterday's fear. He remembered the voice, the one that told him Wednesday, Thursday, Friday were marked for movement. But now, standing at the edge of obedience, everything seemed blurred. The certainty that had burned in his spirit last night now flickered like a dying candle. Faith is easy when you feel it. It's harder when silence replaces fire. He walked through his home as if searching for confirmation in every corner. Nothing spoke, nothing moved. Yet deep inside, he knew something had already begun. Heaven never announces the shift with thunder. It begins quietly, inside the hesitant heart of one who still says yes despite shaking hands. You know this feeling too, that space between belief and breaking. The place where you ask if your prayers still reach beyond the ceiling. Where you wonder if your dreams are sacred visions or just illusions stitched together by hope. That's where all chosen ones are tested, not on the mountaintop, but in the valley of doubt. He stepped outside, and the world was still. The streets were empty, the wind asleep. And then, without warning, he felt it a pulse beneath the air, subtle, yet undeniable. The same pulse he'd felt in dreams. The same one that made time feel fragile, stretched thin between heaven and earth. He whispered, "What if I'm wrong?" But the whisper that answered was not in words. It was in presence. The kind that bends your knees before your mind understands why. He fell to the ground, face pressed against the earth. The dirt smelled of rain and remembrance. It was as if creation itself remembered who he was, even when he forgot. That's the paradox of calling. It will chase you, even into your hiding place. You can delay obedience, but you can't erase divine memory. He rose slowly, dust on his palms, clarity in his eyes. The doubt didn't vanish, but it began to coexist with something stronger, surrender. True faith isn't built by avoiding fear. It's built by walking through it, barefoot, believing that the fire won't destroy you, only refine you. You've felt it too, haven't you? The moment when everything familiar begins to burn, not as punishment, but as purification. Relationships that once anchored you begin to fade. Jobs that once defined you no longer fit. Dreams you once clung to begin to crumble, and for a moment, you think you're losing everything. But in truth, you're being prepared for more than you can imagine. Heaven strips before it crowns. He looked at his reflection in the window, eyes tired, yet alive with something dangerous. Faith reborn from ashes. He whispered, "If I'm chosen, then let it mean something." And as the words left his lips, the atmosphere shifted again. That's when the first sign came. A message from a friend he hadn't spoken to in years. Simple words, but heavy with divine irony. "I don't know why, but I felt like I should reach out today." He froze. The whisper returned, not loud, but undeniable. This is what alignment feels like. The timing wasn't coincidence. It was choreography. Heaven speaking through ordinary gestures, showing him that the unseen was already arranging the visible. He replied with trembling hands, unsure of what to say. Because the truth was, he didn't yet know what God was doing. He only knew that something was being set in motion, something that would require him to leave behind the familiar, Later that day, as dusk settled, he felt the fire again. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that purifies. The kind that turns fear into fuel. His doubt screamed louder than ever. What if you fail? What if you misheard? What if this is all in your head? But faith doesn't silence fear. It simply speaks louder, and in that moment, he heard the whisper again. Move. No explanation, no map. Just a command that echoed through his bones. He took one step, then another. And though the world around him remained still, inside him, mountains began to move. That's what obedience feels like. Quiet chaos, holy uncertainty, sacred motion. As night deepened, he sat alone beneath a sky thick with stars. He looked up and said, I'm not sure if I can do this. The whisper answered, You were never meant to do it alone. And that's when the tears came not of weakness, but of release. The realization that faith isn't about strength, it's about surrender. About trusting that even when you feel lost, heaven has already written the map. You may be walking through your own Thursday, that in-between season where the promise feels distant and the silence feels endless. But remember this, doubt is not the opposite of faith. It is the soil in which true belief grows. He closed his eyes, and for the first time, he didn't ask for signs. He simply said, If this fire is mine to carry, let it refine me, not consume me. And in that prayer, something ancient stirred the quiet approval of heaven. Somewhere in the unseen, angels took position. The path ahead began to open, not with clarity, but with conviction. He would not see the whole staircase, only the next step. And that would have to be enough, because every chosen one must learn that divine timing feels like delay until it suddenly feels like acceleration. One moment you're waiting, the next, everything moves at once. That's the mystery of destiny. It requires you to keep walking, even when the road disappears beneath your feet. He stood, breathed deeply, and whispered into the darkness, I'm ready to burn for what I believe in. And the wind, silent all day, finally moved. Right 333 inches, the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment, because this was not the end of doubt. It was the beginning of fire. And tomorrow, the fire would reveal what was truly meant to rise. The chosen one, he did not sleep that night. The fire within him refused rest. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes, faces from his past, choices he had buried, prayers he had forgotten he prayed. It was as if heaven had turned his memory into a battlefield. By dawn, his body was weary, but his spirit was restless. He whispered into the silence, Is this what awakening feels like? To be torn between who I was and who I am becoming? The question hung in the air unanswered, but the stillness itself seemed to nod. He stepped outside, and the sky was gray, not with rain, but with waiting. The kind of sky that carries the weight of transition. Every sound felt louder, sharper, the echo of a world about to shift. He sensed that this day, more than the rest, would test everything he thought he believed. You know this season when the lessons come faster than your heart can process. When faith no longer comforts, but confronts. When destiny doesn't feel like glory, but grief. That's the breaking point. Not where you lose, but where you're undone. He walked for hours, not knowing where he was going. The streets seemed endless, mirroring the questions in his soul. He remembered the whisper from before move. He was moving, but toward what? He didn't know. Sometimes, obedience looks like wandering. By midday, the storm came sudden, fierce, merciless. He ran for cover beneath a small bridge, rain soaking through his clothes. It was there, in the chill of that moment, that the voice returned. Not a gentle whisper this time, but a thunder within. You asked to be used. You asked to be awakened. Did you think awakening would come without breaking? He fell to his knees again, not out of reverence, but exhaustion. He shouted into the storm, Why choose me? I am not holy enough. I am not brave enough. I am not steady enough. The rain answered with silence, and yet within that silence, truth began to form. Heaven does not choose the perfect. It perfects the chosen. Every wound he had hidden, every fear he had suppressed, now rose to the surface. He saw flashes of every time he had run from his calling, the moments he chose comfort over courage, the prayers he spoke without meaning, the faith he preached but never lived. The weight of his own inconsistency crushed him until he realized that was the point. The breaking was not punishment, it was invitation. He whispered through trembling lips, Then break me, if that's what it takes. And in that instant, something inside him shattered pride, doubt, the illusion of control. What remained was raw faith, stripped of performance. It was not loud or dramatic. It was the quiet surrender of one who has nothing left to prove. He felt the rain begin to ease. The clouds thinned, and a beam of light pierced through, falling directly on him. It wasn't warmth he felt first, but release, the kind that comes only after you've stopped fighting what you were never meant to resist. The voice returned, softer now. I do not need your strength. I need your surrender. He stayed still, drenched, shaking, alive. Something ancient stirred within the memory of every prophet who had ever broken before rising. Moses in the wilderness, David in exile, Elijah under the tree. They had all reached this same point, the threshold between giving up and being given over. You are standing there too, aren't you? On the edge of letting go, but afraid of what will happen if you do. You think your strength is what heaven is waiting for, but it's your surrender that opens the door. He rose, slowly, as if standing for the first time. His eyes lifted to the sky, no longer demanding answers, just willing to listen. That's when he heard it, a whisper behind him, yet somehow inside him. Walk toward the light. There is something waiting beyond this storm. He hesitated, not from disbelief, but from awe. Because for the first time, the path didn't feel forced. It felt written. Every step forward felt guided, as if invisible hands were clearing the debris before him. As he walked, the rain faded into mist, and the mist into sunlight. He reached a hill, the city stretching far below. He stood there, arms open, wind against his face, and realized the breaking had not destroyed him. It had revealed him. He was not who he was yesterday. Something inside him had shifted. The fear that once defined him had lost its power. He was still unsure, still human, but no longer bound. That's what true transformation feels like. Not sudden victory, but quiet resurrection. You do not rise because the world changes. You rise because something eternal inside you finally wakes up. He whispered, so this is faith. Not knowing the outcome, yet walking anyway. And in that whisper, heaven responded. A wind rose, carrying a warmth that wrapped around him like unseen fire. He felt it not as emotion, but as truth. The same spirit that once hovered over chaos, now hovered over him. The breaking point had become the birthplace. He smiled through the tears, not because everything made sense, but because he finally stopped needing it to. The world around him felt new, not because it had changed, but because he had. The ground that once held his fear now held his faith. And as the sun sank behind the horizon, painting the sky in gold and crimson, the voice spoke one final time. You are not at the end. You are at the beginning of revelation. He breathed deeply and whispered, then lead me, even if the path leads through fire again, because once you have been broken by purpose, ordinary life can never hold you again. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe. Tomorrow, the whisper will return not to comfort, but to command. And when it does, the chosen one must decide whether to follow the light or fall back into the shadows. The breaking has prepared the way. The next chapter will demand the step. The chosen one. He woke to a silence that felt alive. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something waiting. The storm was gone, the air still, but the atmosphere carried the weight of unfinished prophecy. He could sense it, the quiet, before the next unfolding. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the faint light bleeding through the curtains. Everything looked ordinary, yet nothing felt the same. The walls seemed to hum with memory, as if even the room knew he had crossed a threshold. The fire that had burned through him yesterday was now a calm ember, pulsing with slow, steady rhythm. He thought the worst was over. He was wrong. This was the most dangerous season, not the chaos, but the quiet. The space after the breaking, before the rebuilding. The silence that tests whether your faith can stand without signs. He walked outside and felt the weight of invisible eyes watching, not in fear, but in awareness. Heaven observes in stillness. Destiny often hides in silence. The ground beneath him felt both holy and heavy, like a promise half fulfilled. He whispered, "What now?" No answer came. Only wind, only stillness. That's how heaven speaks sometimes, through absence, through pause, through nothing. You want a word, but what you get is waiting. You want a door, but what you get is stillness. He wandered down a narrow path, each step echoing louder than it should. The world seemed stretched, caught between movement and rest. Every sound, a bird's call, a distant breeze, the creak of a branch, felt magnified, sacred. It reminded him of the days when he used to pray and wonder if God still listened. But this was different. He wasn't searching anymore. He was sensing. There's a difference between chasing God and recognizing that He's already there, hidden in plain sight. And yet, beneath the awareness, doubt began to stir again. It whispered, "What if you misheard? What if you imagined it all?" The mind always resists what the spirit already knows. He stopped walking, closed his eyes. The silence pressed closer, and then, like a soft ripple through the air, came the whisper, not external, but eternal. "Be still, do not rush the revelation. I am building in silence what will roar in time." He opened his eyes, and everything looked the same, yet somehow, everything had changed. The stillness was no longer void, it was womb. He realized that heaven's quiet was not neglect, but incubation. When destiny pauses, it is not abandoning you. It is preparing you. He remembered how every great story paused before glory. Joseph sat in prison before the throne. David hid in caves before the crown. Even Christ himself lay silent in the tomb before resurrection. Silence does not mean absence. It means preparation for unveiling. Still, the waiting was unbearable. Hours stretched like days. Thoughts collided like waves. He wanted to move, to act, to do. But the whisper returned. Not yet. It was the hardest obedience of all, to stay still. When everything in you screams to move. You've felt it too. The pause that feels like punishment. The quiet that feels like rejection. You keep checking for signs, searching for confirmation, asking if you missed something. But heaven is not silent because you failed. It is silent because it is aligning. He sat beneath a tree, back against the rough bark, head tilted toward the sky. The branches swayed gently above him. In their rhythm, he heard something he had missed before: harmony. The realization that silence is not empty, it's orchestral. Every unseen note preparing for the next crescendo. He began to understand that the silence before the shift was not meant to test his patience, but his posture. Could he still trust, even when heaven withheld the map? Could he still believe when there were no visible signs? The whisper deepened. "You asked for faith. This is where it grows." Faith does not mature in noise. It matures in quiet endurance. It's born in the hidden rooms of surrender, where no one sees, no one applauds, and no one understands. He took a breath and said softly, "Then, let the silence teach me." And as he spoke, something unseen shifted. A gentle breeze moved through the trees, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. Not the storm of yesterday, but the promise of renewal. He realized that heaven often announces new beginnings through subtle signs, a stirring, a word, a whisper that only those who have learned to listen can discern. The silence wasn't punishment, it was invitation. He remembered what the voice had said days ago. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are marked. He was living between those days now, caught in the tension of divine timing. And though his spirit longed for action, heaven was shaping his heart to hear, not just to move. By evening, he stood at the edge of the same hill where he had once wept in the rain. The city lights flickered below like scattered stars. He watched them in silence, and for the first time, he felt peace, not because he understood, but because he no longer needed to. He whispered, "Maybe the silence is the sign," and the air seemed to nod. He smiled faintly, tears glimmering in the dim light. The quiet no longer frightened him. It felt sacred now, like the deep inhale before creation speaks again. In the distance, thunder murmured low across the horizon, not a storm, but a signal. Something was awakening. The stillness had done its work. Tomorrow, the silence would break. Tomorrow, the shift would begin. Write 333 inches, the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment, because the chosen one is learning the final secret, that silence is not the end of the story. It's the breath before destiny speaks again. And when it does, everything will change. The chosen one, when dawn returned, it did not arrive quietly. The light felt different, as though it had traveled through centuries to find him. It pressed against the window with a kind of insistence, illuminating the corners of his room like it was searching for something forgotten. He opened his eyes, and before thought could form, the whisper spoke again. "It's time." He sat up, pulse racing. The silence that had held him for days was gone. In its place came a deep and holy trembling. He didn't know if it was fear or reverence, maybe both. Because when destiny finally calls your name, it does not shout. It simply stands in front of you and waits for you to answer. He dressed in stillness, each motion deliberate, each breath a prayer. He didn't know what he was preparing for, only that heaven had shifted position. The stillness had ended, the test of waiting had passed. What lay ahead would demand more than belief, it would demand obedience. As he stepped outside, the sky burned gold, clouds streaked like fire. The air pulsed with hidden energy. Birds moved in patterns that felt almost prophetic. The whole world seemed to know something he didn't. He whispered, "Where do I go?" The whisper answered, "Follow the light. You'll know when you see it." He walked through streets that had once felt ordinary, but now seemed charged with purpose. Every person he passed, every face he saw, carried a trace of significance. It was as if reality itself had shifted its gaze toward him. But revelation always brings reckoning. Halfway through his walk, doubt struck like lightning quick, merciless, familiar. What if none of this was divine? What if he was just tired, chasing voices in the wind? He stopped, breath shallow, heart divided, and that's when it happened. A man approached him, old, quiet, eyes full of knowing. He said nothing at first, only smiled. Then he whispered, "You've been waiting for confirmation, haven't you?" The chosen one froze. His chest tightened. The old man continued, "You were told to prepare for 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Heaven keeps its appointments. The silence you endured was proof of readiness. The shift begins today." Before he could respond, the man turned away, disappearing into the crowd. The chosen one stood motionless, pulse echoing like thunder in his veins. He wanted to chase the man, demand explanation, but the whisper within stopped him. "You've already heard all you need to know. Now, move." Revelation never explains itself. It simply requires response. He began walking again, but this time his steps felt different, lighter, yet more purposeful. Each one carried weight, like invisible chains falling from his ankles. His heart ached, not from confusion, but from awakening. He was starting to remember something his spirit had always known, that obedience itself is revelation. As he turned the corner, the world around him seemed to shift again. Time slowed, sounds stretched, the colors of the morning deepened. It was as if reality itself bowed to something unseen. He realized he was standing at the exact spot where, years ago, everything had fallen apart, the place of his greatest loss. And there, waiting for him, was the memory he had buried. He saw himself younger, broken, kneeling in the rain, whispering a prayer he had forgotten he ever prayed. "If you still have a plan for me, don't let me die before I live it." The air trembled. The whisper returned, echoing through his bones. "You prayed it then? I answer it now." Tears blurred his vision. The world spun with holy dissonance. He sank to his knees, hands trembling, heart breaking, and healing all at once. Revelation isn't gentle. It exposes what you've ignored. It resurrects what you thought was dead. It demands that you face yourself without disguise. He whispered, "Why here? Why bring me back to this place?" The voice replied, "Because destiny always loops back to the place where faith first broke." He stayed on his knees as the wind picked up, lifting dust and leaves around him like fragments of memory. The air shimmered, not with heat, but with presence. And then, for the first time, he saw, not with his eyes, but with his spirit. A vision unfolded, flashes of what was coming. Doors opening, faces turning, nations shifting. He saw himself standing in rooms he had never entered, speaking words he hadn't yet learned, touching lives he had never known existed. He saw both light and shadow, glory and battle. It was too much. His body trembled, his heart screamed, "I can't do this." The whisper answered, "You were never meant to do it alone." And suddenly, the vision changed. He saw others, countless souls awakening just like him, each one carrying their own flame, their own pain, their own purpose. They were scattered across the world, rising in silence, drawn by the same call. The revelation was not about him alone. It never had been. It was about alignment, a generation awakening to divine timing. He understood, then revelation always births responsibility. The chosen are never chosen for comfort. They are chosen for calling. He rose slowly, every breath heavy with awareness. He was trembling, but no longer afraid. For the first time, the fire in his chest didn't burn, it illuminated. He looked up at the sky, now clear and brilliant, and whispered, "If this is what it means to be chosen, then let my life burn bright enough to awaken others." And heaven responded not with thunder, but with peace, the kind that cannot be described, only experienced. The kind that tells you the war inside has finally found its reason. He began to walk again, every step lighter, the path before him unfolding one moment at a time. The reckoning had not destroyed him. It had restored him. The revelation was not an ending. It was a beginning wrapped in responsibility. And somewhere deep within, he heard the voice say, "Tomorrow will seal what has been revealed today. Prepare your heart. The promise approaches." He stopped, took a breath, and whispered into the wind, "Then let tomorrow come." If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe, because when revelation arrives, reckoning always follows, but so does resurrection. The chosen one had faced the breaking, the silence, the fire. Tomorrow, he would face the seal the moment heaven confirms what earth could never contain. The chosen one. The morning came softly, but the air carried something ancient. It wasn't just light that entered his room, it was presence. The kind that bends time, the kind that makes the world hold its breath. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, as if even time itself was counting toward revelation. He rose slowly, his movements deliberate, aware that this day was not ordinary. Something in his spirit recognized it before his mind could name it. Friday, the third day. The appointed day, the day heaven seals what faith has dared to declare. He stood by the window, watching the horizon ignite with gold. A quiet whisper broke through the stillness. Today, what was spoken will be confirmed. What was planted will rise. What was hidden will be revealed. His breath caught. He remembered every moment that led to this. The storm, the silence, the breaking, the fire. All of it had led here. This was not just another sunrise. It was an unveiling. He whispered, "I'm ready." The whisper answered, "Then step forward." He left his home and walked through the streets with the calm of a man who finally knows where he belongs. The city was awake, but he was moving to a different rhythm. People passed him by, unaware that heaven was walking beside him. He reached the hill, the same hill where he had cried, prayed, and surrendered. But now it looked different. The air shimmered faintly, as though invisible hands had cleared the space for a divine appointment. He closed his eyes. The world went silent. And then, the wind came, not gentle this time, but powerful, a rush that seemed to carry voices from realms unseen. He heard them, echoes of the prophets, whispers of the faithful, songs of the unseen. The same spirit that had once spoken through fire, now moved through breath. The voice returned, deeper than before. This is the seal, the confirmation, the completion of what began 3 days ago. He fell to his knees, not in fear, but in awe. The ground beneath him pulsed like a heartbeat. The light around him deepened until it felt alive, wrapping around him like a cloak. You were refined by fire, tested by silence, and purified through surrender, the voice said. Now you stand not as the one who seeks, but as the one who carries. He bowed lower, tears spilling freely. Every ounce of unworthiness melted away. Every doubt, every delay, every unanswered prayer suddenly made sense. The pain had always been the preparation. The light grew brighter. He felt it move through his chest, his hands, his voice. For the first time, he wasn't just receiving the message, he was the message. His scars had become scripture. His journey had become prophecy. The whisper continued, "You are not called to avoid darkness. You are called to carry light into it. What you feared was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to define you." The wind surged again. Fierce, but not violent, carrying with it the sound of 1,000 unseen wings. His heart raced, but there was no fear, only surrender, only knowing. He opened his eyes, and for a moment, he saw it, a veil lifting between the seen and unseen. Faces, radiant and familiar, watching from the other side. Ancestors, guides, angels, a lineage of faith. They were not distant. They were witnesses. "You are part of something eternal," the voice said. "Every step you took in pain awakened someone else in faith. Every tear you shed watered the ground of another's destiny. Nothing was wasted," he whispered. "Then what do I do now?" The voice replied, Live as proof, speak as flame, walk as light. What has been sealed cannot be undone. And just like that, the wind stilled, the light softened, the moment passed, but not completely. Something inside him remained transformed. The presence did not leave, it lived within him now. He stood, trembling but steady, like a man carrying both eternity and earth inside his chest. The sky above him was no longer distant. It felt open. The same sun that once rose indifferent now seemed to bow in reverence. He looked toward the horizon and saw movement people emerging from their own silence, their own storms, their own breaking points. Some walked uncertainly, others with boldness, but all were drawn by the same invisible call. He understood. This was never just about him. The chosen one was not a title, it was a lineage, a relay of divine fire passed through generations, each awakened soul carrying the spark forward. He spoke softly, not to be heard, but to declare alignment. If destiny has been sealed, then let my life be the signature. A new wind rose gentle this time, brushing against his face like a promise kept. The heavens seemed to respond, not with thunder, but with light that lingered just a moment longer before dissolving into morning. He turned to leave the hill, but paused once more. He looked back, and in the place where he had once knelt in pain, he saw something glimmering faintly in the grass. He bent down and picked it up, a small fragment of stone, smooth and warm, marked by 3 lines crossing each other like a sign. He smiled. The seal. He held it close to his heart, whispering, "Thank you." As he descended the hill, the whisper returned one final time, not behind him, not above him, but within him. The promise has been fulfilled. Now go, awaken the others. He nodded. The mission was clear. The chosen one walked into the day, the same world, yet not the same man. His steps carried certainty, his eyes carried light, and his heart carried eternity. Because when heaven seals what has been spoken, nothing can remain ordinary. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment. This is not the end. It is the ignition. The seal is only the beginning of movement. What has awakened in you will not sleep again. The same fire that chose him has now found you. And now, chosen one, it is your turn to rise.